Didn't even put myself on the screen. I have no idea what was going on there, Wilson. I was funny because I was thinking about when I had you on tonight what I was going to lead out with. I feel like I've exhaled a little bit because, when your team or a team that you cover is going through a coaching search, it is not fun because you're like, hey, man, you got to keep up with it. There's things that are happening. And then I don't even bring myself on the screen. That's how exhausted I was for this. But do you feel a little bit of sigh of relief? Hey, man, we're pretty much done. We're going to start going into spring here in about a little bit more than a month. At least we can exhale and start getting to what on-field's going to look like.
Yeah, it's nice not having to worry too much about, you're still kind of looking over your shoulder now just because, who knows what can happen in college sports, and all that. You just kind of looking over your shoulder. But, LSU staff is, this should be what it looks like. And the roster, I don't think you're going to see any. It would be, certainly surprised if you saw some kind of movement or something. It'd be a pretty wild situation if you did at this point. So, I think everything is kind of in place a little bit until the spring, and then spring practice will come around, and then the April portal window will happen, and then who knows what all hell could break loose then. So at least for now, you can kind of chill and maybe focus on baseball season starting soon, and women's basketball going on, and men's basketball, and maybe you can maybe put football out of your mind if you're an LSU fan for a minute.
Well, it's funny. I had to lead a show because I had to go at this time, and as LSU women's basketball is starting to separate a little bit here, which is great. But it's dude, I mean, in the time of baseball coming up, women's basketball going on, and now LSU football just making all these moves, I'm like, there's too much going on right now. I need a little bit of a break. And then we'll get into mid-June after college baseball and Omaha's done with and be like, this is boring as hell. This has got to pick up. So we whine about it when we need to do stuff. And then, when football's not here, then we don't. Wilson Alexander from The Advocate joining us. Thank you so much for being here, good sir. But as we kind of alluded to there, Alex Atkins is going to be the tight ends coach, as you had reported, and run game coordinator. Thoughts? I'm just going to leave it open-ended. Thoughts on Alex Atkins being in that role?
Well, it's interesting that it feels like more of a way to get him in as the run game coordinator in some ways, instead of yeah, he's the tight ends coach and title, but he's only coached that position once before, back in 2008 at UT Martin. So it's not like you're going out to bring in an experienced tight ends coach. You got him because of his experience as an offensive coordinator the past few years at Florida State, and possibly what he can bring in that role as run game coordinator. At least that's my read on it. Because he has some experience scheming up an offense. He wasn't the primary play caller at Florida State. That was Mike Norvell. Mike Norvell did that until he handed it over to Gus Malzahn upon hiring him, going into the season. But, he was still within those offensive game plan meetings and part of that brain trust the past 3 years at Florida State. So it feels like, okay, you struggled in the run game this past year. Everybody knows it. Maybe this is somebody who can bring some fresh eyes to the table and help get that going. Because as a tight ends coach, he doesn't have a lot of experience, but maybe as a run game coordinator, he can help you get better in that area.
So let's talk about that. I'm with you. I think you're just filling a role in reference to tight ends coach. I mean, I'm sure he'll be in that room. I'm not saying that he won't be. I'm not alluding to any of that. But I think that you have a dual thing here. A basic co-coordinator that may be more involved than ever before, more than I would assume or talking about with Cortez Hankton, right? He may be more involved there. But the interesting thing is I feel like that there's going to be a tight ends analyst that's going to be in there helping receiving, and then Atkins helping with the blocking addition or inline scrimmage stuff. I think it's a little bit different. But the real question that I have is well, not question, it's just a real thought. You can't be 104th in rushing. So I don't know if he's going to call plays or not. And I would ask you, do you think that that's going to, is he going to be a part of that? Or do you think that it's just going to be hey, this is what I would suggest. This is what I think we should do, and then go from there?
Yeah, I don't know, exactly. What I could see maybe happening is throughout the off season, he's part of the whole conversation as they kind of design the run game, and maybe they're redesigning the run game in some way, and as a group they get in there and they're drawing stuff up and they're like, okay, maybe he's able to say, this is what we worked at Florida State for us, and able to bring again, just sort of a different perspective the table. Because I mean, remember, like Joe Sloan and Brad Davis and Cordes Hankton and Brian Kelly and Frank Wilson, like they've all been here for a few years now. So now you got together, and so I don't think it hurts to bring in just like a different set of eyes onto the.
Uh-oh.
My headphones went out there. Sorry about that.
Oh, it's okay.
I think that throughout the offseason kind of helps you with that. And then once you get into game planning, helping you like, okay, see what defenses do. This is what we can do run game wise to attack these things. Is he going to call plays on game day? I mean, I would be surprised, if they went to that. And I don't think you're going to end up with something like a triple co-coordinator, situation with the three of them. But like, just another voice in the room and somebody with a little bit maybe of expertise in that area.
The only reason I bring it up is because Brian Kelly had a play sheet for the last 4 weeks, right? Like, and I mean, you're not going to tell me, Wilson, you're not going to tell me that he's not involved in the running game. When he's going to every press conference talking about we got to run the ball more to help out Garrett, you get a play sheet, you go out there during Florida, your complete system changed. I mean, like you started running the football just more. I mean, I get it's – I don't want to say it's a lesser opponent. They still beat you, but it definitely changed in the style and philosophy. And that's the only question that I have is like, look, I love the move. I really do love the move. It's just, I guess, not knowing the answers to the puzzle piece or the question of like, my mind goes scatterbrained. I go all over the place and I get excited. I'm like, well, shit, I thought he was going to be doing this. And now I probably should have backed off. But I do think from that perspective, you got to, you're bringing an O-line coach in for tight ends. What else are you bringing him in for, really? Like that's the thing that I'm bringing up here. And they ran pretty well against us. I mean, I'm just going to throw it out there. 2-13-22, and then obviously last year. Another addition that they brought into was Lance Guidry. I know that Miami gave up a lot of explosive plays last year, or this past year. I don't even know how to explain it. I guess it is last year now, but Lance has been in the state of Louisiana a lot. Bob Diaco moves on, Lance Guidry in. I guess your thoughts on the Lance Guidry move?
I mean, you're bringing in somebody who knows this state, through and through. High school, who's coached at the high school level, coached at the college level at multiple places, and somebody who I think Blake Baker just respects as a coach. And so it's like an experienced voice. Again, kind of the same thing with Atkins, but like another sort of experienced guy who also has a good bit of experience coaching defensive backs specifically. Right. So maybe it's somebody who can help out there with the safeties, as an analyst, and just get more coaching into that group. But also somebody who can look at things and has been a defensive coordinator at a high level. Exactly. Miami wasn't perfect, but it's not like you're bringing in Lance Guidry to be your defensive coordinator.
Right.
He's somebody who can maybe he sees something and can point things out and help you out in some different areas and help you with the game planning. And I mean, gosh, we're talking about two guys who both prepped for Clemson last year. So that doesn't hurt either. Alex Atkins and Lance Guidry.
That's an expensive game one try to get over. You're doing everything you can to beat Clemson. You're going all in. I don't mind it.
Yeah. But it's also just, somebody who he's out of a job, leaving Miami, and then you got an opportunity to bring him back to his home state. He's got an opportunity to come back here, and it just feels like a good fit. I mean, he's able to come back to his home state. You're adding a really experienced coach who knows this area really well, and knowing the area, I think, translates more when you're an on-field coach. And even though that's a little bit different now because analysts can do more, like those 10 primary assistants are the ones recruiting off campus. Like you're not doing that as an analyst, but it doesn't hurt to have more of that around you, especially if any sort of rules around analysts continue to change in some way. Like he's a guy who knows this state so well that it doesn't hurt to have that connection on your staff.
You know what I thought about and we talked about this over the last couple of weeks, right? When I had been starting to hear, and I know you had reported about the Alex Atkins move. Could you imagine Nick Saban with all them assistants, and now that they can coach on field technically and they don't have to hide anything? This man would have literally had Lane Kiffin and Steve Sarkisian literally right there being able to coach on field. I mean, like, come on. He was above his time, and then he's like, hey, bro, I leave, and then you change the rule? Like, did y'all do this? Because they host Nick Saban. That's what I feel. I mean, like, how can you do that?
Saban was the trendsetter taking advantage of it already anyway. So, I mean,
no doubt.
We've just been catching up.
And let's just be honest. Nobody was allowed in those practices anyway. And they were doing it anyway. Let's not be foolish here and think
everybody was doing it anyway. It just made it easy.
And speaking about Lance Guidry, you talked about DB earlier, but it's been specific with safety. When he was at Southeastern here in Hammond, I mean, I know he was the DC, but I mean, look, you go out there and he's with the safety room. Like, he's always been more with the safety room when he's been given the chance, which brings up an interesting question here about Harold Perkins. Now, I don't know what they're going to do here, but that star role is something that you can be very hands-on with if you are specifically an analyst or off-field role guy. I know Lance. I'm just going to say it like this. I would put him with Harold Perkins if you're moving him at star and get after it. Like, have his own personnel coach, like own personal coach for just him. They go bowling together. They go get nachos. After practice, they're going to or what's that? Torchy's Tacos next to the stadium. That's what I would do, Wilson, because you're bringing him back, and I don't think you're going to keep him inside. That might be the only other place to put him.
That is interesting that maybe, that thought. I hadn't given that much thought, that maybe you're basically just hiring him to coach up Harold in that star position, because the star position can be so many different things.
Yes.
Like, it's not like what we saw it do last year. I think is a good blueprint for if they want to use Harold in that spot, like blitzing 50% of the time and playing him around the line of scrimmage, but more out in space like they did with Major. Like, you can do that. But like, if they didn't want to do that with Harold, like we've seen other teams use very different skill set types and body types at the star position. Georgia and Alabama, to name a few, they really popularized it in the first place, especially Saban did. So it's like, but yeah, if you want to move Harold to that spot, and again, for the third year in a row, we're all like, what are you going to do with Harold Perkins? And you wanting to get him ready for a position that he has some experience in, because as Brian Kelly anyway explained it to me last spring, was that the star position was very similar to what Harold did as a sophomore in 2022, as that strong side outside linebacker. So like, it wouldn't be completely new for him, but you need to get him coached up, especially coming off the ACL. It's like, how much can you really do with him on the field throughout the season anyway? And so, yeah, it's an interesting thought. I hadn't really considered that fully. Like, if Lance would be able to just give him specific instruction all off season. I don't know. It is also contingent on when is Harold getting back on the field, right?
Very true.
Be able to do until, you wouldn't expect him to be doing anything in the spring. So it's like, okay, that's probably something that's really more of a consideration come preseason camp when you're able to kind of figure out his status.
I think that role, take Harold Perkins, take my conspiracy theory out of it for just a moment. I have no idea who's going to be there. Like, I mean, I really don't, because the truth is you're not going to be able to go the 4-3 like you win in that bowl game. Teams are going to bust you up. So I am interested to see. But then, I mean, look, Bob Diaco leaves, and then you bring in Lance Guidry, and you're going to shade it as the Louisiana connection. You could have found another big analyst defensively that did not coach safeties. Like, let's not be naive here. So I'm just so intrigued about that entire DB room as a whole. We were talking about DJ Pickett tonight. I mean, On3 came out with their last recruiting rankings, and I'm like, look, man. I mean, Wilson, if we go out there day one at practice and my man's at the boundary, okay, I'm just sitting here saying to myself, like, we about to have a fun spring, because you and I both know that that's going to be a massive talking piece. Like, what does he look like? Then what happens with like Ashton Stamps? Because I would assume that Mansour Delane is going to be at the other boundary. I mean, you went and got him. You're basically telling me that you needed an entire new defense. So that whole room, I just feel like I'm going to be on the other field where everybody's watching, offense, where everybody goes first. I'm just going to be at the DBs. What are we doing over here?
Well, I'll be right next to you then, because that's what I'm most interested in. It's funny that you mentioned we're on the same page, I guess, because it was I did a depth chart break sort of reset, just kind of trying to like, okay. I mean, I talk to fans who like closely follow the team, and like they're like, wait, who's on the team? So like, I just figured like, all right, let's do a reset.
Right.
Who is still here? And I sort of put in Pickett and Delaney as well and it's so funny you mentioned that, because the same thought came to my head. Ashton Stamps played more snaps than anybody on LSU's defense last season. He was number one, Weeks was number 2. This is according to Pro Football Focus. And this is a guy who started every single game for you. And he wasn't like a top tier elite corner, but like played a ton. And he's gonna have to fight for a spot. Like, this isn't usually coming off of a season in which you played more snaps than everybody else in the defense. Like you feel pretty secure in where you're at on the defense. And Ashton, I mean, he's got to fight for playing time. And that's, I think, a good thing for LSU's cornerback room.
No
you got
doubt.
a guy like that coming back, and he's not even guaranteed playing time because it breeds competition, and you let the cream rise to the top. And you've got a guy now like Pickett, a 5-star. You've got Delaney, who was really productive, and that's the other thing with him is LSU can spend really the whole offseason like figuring out like, okay, where does he go best? You could move him to safety, but he's more of a nickel or a corner. Is that somebody who you would want to put a star? Probably not. In that case, you would need the star to be really more of just a nickel because you wouldn't want him as close to the line of scrimmage. So, yeah, I would expect the first day of practice, Stamps is probably running with the ones.
Right.
Because you're coming off last year, you're kind of putting him in that role. But it's going to be fascinating to see kind of how that shakes out throughout the offseason and who's really emerging there. Because there's been so much buzz about Pickett already that he's, I think, going to have a very good chance to, start and push for a starting spot in week 1.
You know what day 1 is anyway when you go out there. It's badge day. You get your badge, right? Like, I mean, come on. They're not going to show you anything. I mean, if you didn't have to go get the badge, I mean, you really technically, I guess, wouldn't need to be out there. One last staff move I want to get to you with that I think is also very intriguing. Grambling State, Amand Anand. Penn State, a couple years ago when he was the analyst for special teams, they led the country in block kicks. Went to Grambling, has been in Texas, not this University of Texas, but I'm pretty sure it was Texas Southern, where he was also a running backs coach. I mean, dude's been at Penn State, Baylor, then moved up the ranks to try to be a real position coach here. And then he's back now he's at a big school in the SEC as an analyst on special teams. I don't care what you tell me. You're actually hiring a guy that's been around the block for special teams. Like, this is not Bob Diaco, a linebackers coach, going and doing special teams. This is a real special teams guy. Am I overreading an analyst spot here?
No, not at all. I mean, I don't know that they're going to have anybody on staff because, like we said, with their hiring Atkins as the run game coordinator and tight ends coach, you've got everybody else on staff set. Like, I don't know that they're going to have somebody with the title of special teams coordinator unless you just sort of arbitrarily give it to someone
for a pay bump.
Exactly. Because
give it to Bo Davis.
And they officially listed Amand on their directory as a senior special teams analyst today. And I mean, I think that's what he basically is going to be, is your special teams coordinator. The other part of that is that Lester Erb, who had been, the special teams analyst the last few years, he was let go after this, amid all those like sort of off-field staff changes that they made, I guess about 2 weeks ago now. And Lester, as Kelly said, was the one who was designing the schemes over the past few years. And for a while, Kelly would always say that he was happy with the schemes and just that the execution needed to be better. And they need to get, the drops were the problem and that kind of thing coming off like that first season. And so Lester had a key role there. And like you said, in terms of the on-field instruction, Diaco was doing a lot of it. Now they're both gone. And so, and so is Nagel, who of course at least had the title of special teams coordinator. And so, yeah, there's a whole change there. And Amand is the one who they brought in, I think, to be the guy who is going to essentially run those special teams. Like you said, I hope that, I'm interested to see if LSU is able to start blocking some kicks. Because, yeah, I mean, Grambling had, I just pulled it up, 7 blocked kicks, 4 blocked punts last year. They were tied for second in the FCS in both of those categories. And like you said, the Penn State had some blocked kicks too. So it's like maybe he can bring something that's a little bit more disruptive, make special teams a little bit more of an area where LSU can actually change a game. Part of that's also going to be getting a punter who can flip the field. But in terms of schematically, it's like kick coverage and blocked punts and punt coverage and that kind of thing just needs to continue to get better. It just hasn't been great the last few years. It wasn't as much of a problem this past season at times, but there was other, execution issues on special teams. I think he's going to be the guy who's coming in here whose role it is to clean that up and make that more of a strength.
Yeah, especially A&M game, right? Yeah, I mean, like you, exactly. I mean, the A&M game, special teams was a big one there. And what's interesting, yes, the Grambling State thing, but even at Texas Southern, like they were number 1 in the country in special teams. Then Penn State, something happened with Baylor. If a guy does it 3 out of 4 times, he hits 750. I'm probably going to lean on the times if he's hitting, not in a new staff change year.
Well, Baylor, he was a quality control coach, so I wouldn't put that too much on him.
Right. So exactly. So then you talk about Penn State where they led the team or led the nation in block kicks. I'm just I'm very intrigued by this. I feel like you're stealing a position. Like, really, I do. And now I think because of this on-field role where you can coach on field like that, I think it's just what teams are doing, Wilson, if I'm being honest. I'm not saying that Jacoby Stevens and Nick Brissett, they're let go to make room for other analysts because you're going to bring analysts in anyway. But it just feels like that's what you're leaning towards. Like, hey, we're going to trim some fat here and then bring in some others. Because, quite frankly, I understand Diaco, but you bringing in Diaco for defense, you got Lance Guidry, but Diaco ran it. So I still have two guys that are coming in, okay, that are doing different things. So I don't know. Maybe that is the part of the conspiracy theorist that I'm bringing, that maybe they're trying to steal one here, but I guess what do I know?
Well, I was going to add to that real quick. Just remember that, all those staff changes in terms of, Brissett and Jacoby and all that,
all field.
They've lost, 3 or 4 analysts to other jobs. They got position coach jobs. So, you're just kind of, filling in those spots, those guys who already left, like Eddie Hicks and Paul Turner and the other names are escaping me. But, they have some openings in the analyst group.
Right. The offensive guys pretty much all went to Charlotte, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Correct. Right. Last one for you here, Wilson. Excuse me. I had a question posed to me this week that I'm going to throw onto you and see if you think that I'm crazy too. Or just the question's crazy. I've been asked a lot, is LSU getting in a place right now with the portal moves, money spent, coaching staff brought in? You're getting to a place where if you miss the playoffs now, you're in trouble, right? Basically it's playoff or bust now. Last year kind of was what it was. You're replacing a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. Okay, I could see it your first time starting quarterback. But, man, you've made a lot of moves. You spent a lot of money. I mean, Wilson, I feel like the fan base wants you to be in that 12-team playoff.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, okay. I think it was playoff or bust last year just because that's the expectations at LSU. And, yeah, you could now in retrospect see how much they were replacing. I mean, going into last year, I was like, I don't know that this is a playoff team, but that still was the expectation. But now I feel like it's maybe reasonable. I mean, you should be in the playoff every year anyway. That should be the expectation, and that's a reasonable expectation to have. It's not going to happen every single year. Obviously, they'd missed it last year, but that should always be the expectation. But for this specific team, I mean, you're bringing back a quarterback, which is not something a good quarterback who has the potential to get better, which is not a lot of other contenders in the SEC are replacing their quarterbacks. You're having a second year of a defensive staff. We saw some strides, and then they bring in a lot of portal talent. We'll see exactly how that all meshes together and fits. It's so hard across college football to be okay, that team's going to be good. That team's going to be good, because so many teams are overturning talent year over year over year. There's so much movement in the portal, but LSU signs the number 1 portal class, and that's automatically going to put those expectations on there. And I would say reasonably. You're also in the 4th year under Brian Kelly. If you don't make the playoff this year, the heat, the temperature on his seat is going to get pretty darn warm if they miss it this season. Now, you go into this year with those expectations. I think, as you and I have talked about before, that does not just guarantee success just because you assign the number 1 portal class. They got to make this thing fit together. They got to keep getting better in the offseason. We saw that with Ole Miss, but I guess the point is just that, yes, they should be in the mix, and if they don't miss it, then they should rightfully be scrutinized for that, because they have put a lot in on this year on making a push to at least make the playoff. Are they a championship contender? I don't know. Let's see how things start to play out over the season. But are they a playoff contender? Yes, they absolutely should be in the mix for one of those at-large spots at the very least, and we'll just kind of see how every other team looks in the midst of that as well.
It's interesting. You brought up that it's so difficult to talk about it. And the other show that I do is just a national college football show. That's all we do all year long, me and Joe. There's not an Ohio State talent team. There's not one. Yeah. We came into the season last year talking about the collision course with Georgia and Ohio State. It is here. It is going to be nothing but pure athletes. And, Ohio State got there, but Georgia had some injuries. And, I mean, what are you supposed to do? So it comes to a point where – brother, they led
that's another discussion, but anyway.
Well, I'll talk to you about college football. Even in that game with Texas, right? Like if Dylan Bell, I mean, you don't run 4 minutes off the clock, maybe you get the ball back. But either way, I mean, I don't know who the number one team in the country is right now.
I've seen a lot of Penn State, which I think is interesting because because you're talking about that talent, that reload, that push. Like they're doing some of what Ohio State did last year, and obviously just swipe Jim Knowles. Penn State, maybe they brought a lot of guys back. They did what Ohio State did, which was use a lot of money to retain a lot of your top talent. But the thing is that Penn State has not, under James Franklin, won enough big games to, I think, elicit enough confidence that they're now going to get over the hump. So they're very different from Ohio State in that way, and it's interesting because they might have the most talented team in the country, at least in terms of guys coming back. But I don't think that the degree of confidence is nearly as high as it was at Ohio State coming into last season.
Without a doubt. I see the argument with Penn State. I had them at 2 this week, went away too early. The only reason is because the last decade of national champions, you can run through all of them. All of them had a top 15 defensive total defense. All of them were in the top 15 or 20 in rushing. Why did Georgia and Texas ultimately get beat this year? They could not run the football to save their life, right? Like Georgia was bad running the football, even with Etienne, and the O-line got beat up a little bit. And then Texas, I mean, man, outside that Clemson game, which gives you a little hope, I guess, because you faced Clemson, there were multiple games that they lost. All the games they lost, they didn't crack over 100. They barely cracked 100 over Michigan. Well, maybe Alabama's asking now how they did that. I don't know, but that's neither here nor there. All right, Wilson Alexander from The Advocate. Tell everybody, I know they know. I've said it a couple times. It's right there, but tell everybody where they can catch all your stuff, bud.
Yeah, theadvocate.com, NOLA.com, best place to find everything. We cover every sport on campus, and that's the best place to go. Find we do a twice weekly podcast. You can find that on LSU Tigers on NOLA, over on YouTube. And then also, I would just say to encourage everyone to sign up for our newsletter. Easy to do. You get all the headlines in your inbox every morning, and then breaking news alerts are there too. So I would say that those would be the best places. You can find me on X or Blue Sky or all that stuff as well. So
I did Blue Sky the other day or whenever it was, okay? And then when I first got on there, there's already a Blake J. Ruffino. And I'm like, what? I logged into the wrong account and made a new one or something. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what to do. So here we go. I probably should have waited on somebody anyway. All right, Wilson, thank you so much, man. This was fantastic. I love having these conversations with you, man. Y'all have a good night.
Always enjoy it, Blake. You have a good one too.
All right, that's